Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all. It's Bear here, and I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, A Box with No Lid. A channel I'm creating not just to bring the awareness around the lived reality trauma and complex trauma creates, but I really want to bring what I've learned over my own personal experiences and my many, many years as an advocate and as a practitioner, in the humble hope that what I've learned will translate enough to help improve the quality of your lives, and I hope to fill in some of the gaps between what a textbook says and what is actually lived and how trauma experiences play out in our lives. Now, this is the next video in the adoption series, and I've talked about this in other videos, the lack of information and how we're separated from the records of what came before, but I want to do another layer of emphasis upon the outcome and consequence of this as it relates to what I've been talking about in the last few videos around the need to learn how to co-regulate and to heal that attachment base, but also why it is so important for the understandings in an adopted family or in any long-term caregiving role to create a middle place between the child that was removed and placed and the non-biological family, rather than one needing to fit either side. Create a place in the middle where both can reside and create a home environment with that perspective being at its base. Create middle ground to where all sides learn to come together and work together and heal what comes up in the process of creating that. Because so often in placement situations, either the child has to sacrifice everything they are to fit into the family that is raising them, or the family that is choosing to raise overcompensate and go too far the other way in doing everything that the child requires, to the point where the child doesn't heal or resolve. They get a disproportionate understanding of the world around them. And a key piece to understanding this middle road, to create this middle ecology, all revolves around understanding where the child came from, where the infant came from. As I've raised in other videos, when you look at the Felitti studies and the ACE studies, adverse childhood experience studies, which is a scale to gauging the trauma impact of early childhood trauma, and the scale experience in a very non-invasive way. There are a series of 10 or more questions, and you get an idea. It creates a diagnostic framework to work with. But when you look at the thousands, and it's literally thousands of studies that back this up, the evidence is there just how much early childhood and developmental trauma impacts on the child, and also how much generational trauma, epigenetic-based trauma responses, predispositions, and the in utero trauma experiences, what the mother crosses the placenta stuff, how much that creates an ecology that fundamentally changes key components within that infant and that young child that need to be understood, to be worked with. And because within, by design, adoption is there to separate a child from everything that came before them, all that information, all their biological history, it's ignored. And like everything in the world that is adoption, it is ignored until it's unavoidable. And the problem is, when it's unavoidable, when it has to be looked at, you're on your own. There isn't a mechanism or a group or an organization, there isn't a recognition pathway within governance and within medical health to latch into, to go, okay, this is a protocol that can be followed. You're on your own trying to convince and find answers that take sometimes years, if at all possible, where you may only have days and weeks. And what I'm talking about is, I know of so many instances through all my years of being around this stuff and the advocacy component, where, an adoptee was complacent until it became a critical component where to save their child's life. where having, familial, like family medical history was the difference between their child living or passing, or getting a critical diagnosis of a complex illness, and so many other layers that play out. And I know of so many instances, and I listen on forums and I observe on forums in the comments and what people are writing and posting about their struggles with complex undiagnosed illness and how debilitating it is. And I'm fully aware of where it came from. But if I put anything forward, it is ignored or not accepted. But when you look at these studies, it shows that this will lead to this, will lead to this, creating this. And that, I guess, is the whole basis of my channel, of the Box with No Lid, is I want to go that this, and this create that. And if you don't understand these steps, you cannot understand that. And if you cannot understand that, you cannot resolve it. That's the perspective that I live and do everything from. And because in the world of adoption, we are denied access to this critical information, it shuts down so many pathways. When you look at the Felides studies, when you look at the ACE studies, when you look at a lot of other trauma-based studies of how early childhood and across placenta and generational create chronic illness, is the predispositions. It alters the development of the amygdala and HP axis. It alters how our body responds to stress and threat. It also alters how our body heals from a stress response. When you're looking at oxytocin and dopamine and how that is changed when a child goes through infant trauma. So the ability for the body to turn off a stress state and to deal with healing the parts of the body that were damaged during that stress response. When that is altered, it means that our stress response is active and it remains active, and our body's ability to heal it is impaired, if not present at all. The only thing medical science will do at a general level is offer a chemical or a synthetic alternative. But my question has always been how effective that is in these circumstances without knowing the history, because does the body know how to work with it? But that's for another video. But in this video, because we don't have the medical evidence required to answer the questions the doctor asks, because we can only say, well, I'm an adoptee, I don't have access to my medical history. Let's just say, from a doctor's perspective, the diagnosis of this complex illness will take 100 hours of their time. And you, over 4 visits, will only pay them for 1 hour out of that 100. Due to, the way our medical health system works. They're not there to, they're not going to diagnose regardless of what they're being paid. They'll do what they're paid for. Because we can't answer the questions, we cannot provide information, it is not economically viable for any medical practice to invest the amount of time to get a diagnosis. And this is where we're prejudiced against, this is where we're dismissed and dehumanized, because if we challenge, we're made out to be, the hypochondriacs, or we're made out with whatever they put in their notes on your file that you don't get access to. That shuts down all further attempts at getting medical help. All this process, as I said in countless videos, is geared at every consequence of what was done when you removed us and placed us becomes our fault. And when you look at it from a therapeutic perspective, if you don't have the understanding of the predispositions you inherited, when you answer the basic questionnaire of a therapist and you go, yeah, my childhood was pretty grey, my parents, there was no alcoholism, there was no violence, no domestic violence, it's just that we were very separate, there was never really any closeness, we all kind of did our own thing. They go, well, there's no key markers to measure your response, and they make assumptions. And those assumptions, 9 times out of 10, are wrong. When if you come from a generational trauma base, and there are reasons why you remove children, and there are systemic reasons why children are removed without any lawful background. When you look at any mixed race from indigenous backgrounds are taken, if a woman's gone through domestic violence, had a child removed, any future children she has, they're automatically taken at birth, regardless of how she's changed her circumstance, and so forth and so forth. It goes both ways. But there is a background. there is generational trauma, there are epigenetic influences, there are inherited predispositions. But because the adoption or the placement is remembered as being fairly bland, there is no recognition of those predispositions, therefore they're not worked with. And there's a whole bunch of assumptions, which is the primary understanding I want from this particular video, is these assumptions, 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, are wrong. And it ends the quality of life, or it ends life. I see it play out all the time. As I said, nothing matters until it does. Until you are scrambling to try to get information to save your very, very sick child, and that is tied up in your genetic ancestry, and you can't because you can't access it, and you're lawfully stopped from accessing it, and you've got to apply to judges, you've got to apply for court cases, you can challenge all that, but that takes years. And where you've got days or weeks and the process takes years, this is why this understanding is important, so that there is a protocol and a mechanism there. I tried, and several others tried during the process here in Australia, where we had Senate inquiries and the federal apology for forced adoption and so forth and so forth. And none of the recommendations from those inquiries, none of them have been followed up by government. And a lot of that is, as I said, because it doesn't matter until it does. And that attitude in the advocacy side has driven me to despair, and it's made me back out of a lot of things, because you can see how it's going to play out, and you can talk till you're blue in the face trying to explain it, and then when it does, it's too late. Hence this video, hence this channel, is I'm trying to bring that understanding of the importance of getting as much information as you can, even in open adoptions, the pathways of getting access to family medical history dissipate over time. It's doing the research, and it's creating as much background as you can. It's putting in that as much common sense as you can. To give an example, I'm a Vietnam War baby. I'm an R&R baby from the Vietnam War. So dioxin from Agent Orange is a key component. So all the, you can tell by what was around then and what the likelihood of your exposure as potential evidence to give forward when you're giving, when you're trying to seek the support and the advice or the medical help you're doing. Gain this information whilst you have time. Because as I said, it doesn't matter until it does. And when it does, you won't have the time. I really hope this video makes sense, and it is valued, because it is really important, and I was reminded of it, as I said, in so many of these videos. I get reminded to raise these things by what I've read or see happening or unfolding currently within forums or within interactions that I personally have. And this is important, and this knowledge is kind of critical, and the understanding that it is not our fault why we don't have it is also and just as critical. End the assumptions and start not accepting less than, and basically put into play what you're able to, so that you can start to make an advocate for the differences in your own life and getting that support. When you're dealing with a doctor, go, look, it's not my fault, I cannot give you this information, and you take it further. You push for diagnostic tests and so forth to get the answers you need as best you're able to. I said, I hope this video makes sense and is valued. I thank you guys for your time. Please be mindful, please be respectful, and I'll see you all next time.